Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Natasha Locken and I am the Head of Marketing, Communications and Events at the ACU, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. It's fair to say that 2021 has been a busy and exciting year for the ACU and for the international higher education sector. You know, from navigating the second year of a global pandemic to coming together to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we feel incredibly proud of what members of the Association of Commonwealth Universities across the globe have achieved this year. And year after year, universities continue to prove their vital role in society, and 2021 has been no different. As the year draws to a close, it's a great time to reflect on some of these successes and also the year ahead, which is why I am delighted to be joined by our Secretary General, Dr Joanna Newman, to do just that. Hi, Joanna, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Natasha. Great to be here.
And Joanna, I thought we'd start by asking what your highlights are from the year. You know, what activities really stood out to you the most when you reflect on the past nearly 12 months?
I never like this question because it's always the last thing that's happened that feels like the biggest highlight. And then you go back and you forget that, oh my goodness, all of this happened as well. So I might actually go backwards and start backwards by saying that 2020 ended with a lot of disappointment for lots of people in the UK, but also all around the world, because we were expecting to kind of come out of a pandemic. And the whole year had been a year of massive learning and skilling up and inequality and devastation. And then just as we thought things were getting better, we in the UK had a lockdown again at Christmas. And the case numbers went up. But I mean, I'm aware we run a global network. And so, you know, there were different experiences in every other country, but let's say in general the pandemic was still very high on everybody's minds and in everybody's lives. So 2021 didn't start as well as we were hoping it would, but I think one of the biggest highlights for me is how much we've all learned from the last 18 months in terms of being so much more agile and flexible and understanding how technology really can help. Amazingly. And I'm not hiding the fact that, you know, one of my highlights actually, so to start with, one of my highlights was that the ACU did a survey of universities asking them how COVID was impacting on teaching and learning spaces. And at the same time, we did some webinars that I'm really proud of, where we had experts from different universities in different countries talking about how do they assess students online, how do they support pedagogy, how do they support students. And we were getting some really fantastic examples of good practice, but also just at our core, what we are is a membership organisation. So members were helping other members and sort of seeding ideas that could then be taken on and developed in other universities and countries. So that was brilliant. But at the same time, the survey we did was really interesting and highlighted a huge digital divide. Not only in the obvious sense that some countries have much better access to data than others, but also within countries and within institutions, you found that actually generally students had far less access to good equipment and data and even places to work and study, particularly during times where campuses were locked down, than more senior staff or more senior researchers did. So that was one finding. And the other finding was that where campuses were shut down, not all universities were able to take advantage of digital technology or pedagogy. And so it was a very mixed bag of what students received in all countries. There was a really mixed bag about what was excellent and what wasn't. But again, going back to the ACU, I think the power of our network is that we are able to share best practice and share how things can work well. So, you know, that's been a highlight for me, has actually been bringing different people together to actually exchange ideas and how to do assessment really well, how to support students through this, how to keep courses going, and actually how to keep research going. So that's going to be my next highlight, actually.
No, I mean, I think I completely agree that it's really interesting how when we think about technology, it's both been this fantastic enabler, and for an international network like ours, it's really enabled us to, as you said, like enable our members to help each other while being kind of, you know, sort of very kind of physically grounded, as it were, and not able to travel. But at the same time, obviously, the technology is a bit of a divider as well, and it's really highlighted the inequality that you spoke about. But your next highlight is research.
Well, my next highlight was about research, I think, and pedagogy again. But, you know, the ACU does a summer school every year. and it's quite competitive. Lots of universities compete to host it because we give a grant to that university. They're able to host the summer school. They curate the program, so the selection of which university takes it on depends on the excellence of the academic program thought through. But up until 2020, I think we had a live one in 19, all summer schools were sort of predicated on the idea that students, undergraduate to postgraduate, selected from across the Commonwealth would go to that university and have a summer school there. I remember also gearing up, and this is 2020, but thinking, well, we're not going to cancel everything. We've got to actually understand, how could we do things online better than we've done things before? How can we compensate? I think the first thought was really about compensation. And we've now done 2 years running. We did a summer school virtually in Ghana in 2020, and this 20, yeah, I think I'm getting it right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then 2019, and then in 2020, 2020 and 2021. Sorry, my years mixed up.
What
in
time?
Ghana, and 2021 was the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, and the one in Mumbai was on the critical infrastructure. And both of those summer schools worked really well. We learned a huge amount from them. We managed to put in cultural programs and time away from screen and collaborative projects that people could do together. And one of the highlights I hope for 22 will be to see what's happened to those students and how have they taken forward some of their projects together, because that's another thing that I'm really proud of what we do, is we bring students from different backgrounds together, and sometimes, some of the summer schools, I remember from visiting them in the past, you'll have a student from India and a student from Pakistan talking about, the fact that in a normal life, it would be very difficult to meet in their countries, but actually by being brought together in a different environment, they can meet and exchange ideas and learn from each other. Basis of all kind of progress.
I had the privilege of speaking to a few of the summer school students on a similar kind of live chat like this, and I was really struck by what you said, that connection, and how they've been able to do that virtually, and that those principles of, not just the education and experience as individuals, but learning from each other, and the intercultural experience, and actually that idea of actually getting a sense of what is it like to live in another country, what are some of the opportunities and challenges that they have, and again, coming together around this topic of critical infrastructure and how you respond to disasters. They were really able to do that, even though they were doing it through screens. They were really great.
Yeah, so that's for me an amazing highlight. Another other highlights, I'll come to the end of 21 now, and so of course another huge highlight for me was going to COP26 in Glasgow with a group, and we were, I think, one of the only higher education organisations accredited to be at COP because of our UN accredited status. And so we held an event with the government of Antigua and Barbuda and the Commonwealth Secretariat on establishing a centre for the blue economy in a small island state, Antigua and Barbuda. And it was a fabulous event. It obviously had relevance to audiences from Nigeria, from Fiji, from other countries, looking at how a small island state with a large ocean can actually become more sustainable for its own people, but also important in the region. So that was absolutely fantastic. And thinking about COP26 and the messaging, I think one of the really important sort of things that happened implicitly almost was that by being in the room, higher education was in the room. And in many of these scientific conferences, or indeed conferences about development or conferences about sustainable development goals, higher education is not in the room. And as you know, a core belief of the ACU, and in fact a priority objective, is for governments and for the United Nations and Commonwealth heads of governments to understand that when you talk about education, you're talking about cradle to grave. You're talking about an ecosystem that has to include a component of funding higher education too. Because without it, how are you going to get really well-trained teachers? How are you going to get research into how best to teach children and how best can they learn in different environments? How are you going to get some of that applied and basic research that changes the world?
Yeah, and I think that's, that message is it's such a strong message, and it seems to be becoming even more important as governments start to think about kind of the post-pandemic recovery, and there is a focus on education, but specifically, that mustn't be at the kind of expense, as it were, of higher education. We need universities. I guess thinking about sort of, as you said, it's been a busy year, and that you've touched upon a few key areas there. What do you think are some of the areas of learning that should be taken forward into the next year?
Gosh, well, a number of things. What we'll be taking, I think, to the Commonwealth Education Ministers Conference, for example, in Nairobi, which we hope will happen in the spring of 22. The digital divide is a really, really important area for us, I think. Making it, so I think some of the learnings is that it's not rocket science to actually fund infrastructure or fund partnerships with industry and with government to enable access to data, so that if we have to shut down campuses again, which is entirely possible, the kind of really excellent pedagogy and online materials can be shared. And one of the other projects I'm really proud of, which I have to say, is the Programme for Enhanced and Blended Learning, which demonstrated exactly that. It was a programme conceived prior to COVID, in a way to address the huge supply and demand problem, because that would be the other thing I would be taking learning, is that there is a huge demand for higher education that we must be able to supply. And that can't all be done through scholarships and international mobility. And at the moment, you find extraordinary statistics of, 300 students to one lecturer in some countries. And yet in sub-Saharan Africa, across sub-Saharan Africa, you have the most extraordinary population of young people who deserve and need access to higher education. They're our future. And so the Programme for Enhanced and Blended Learning, I don't actually have the statistics in front of me, although I might have them somewhere if I look, is that they created really high quality accredited material that was co-created with local partners. So 20 universities in East Africa took part. So this isn't material being kind of bussed in with some relevance and some not. The old colonial model of learning about British history in a Caribbean country and not learning about your own history. This is actually co-created material that's put together that is accredited of high quality, and then the lecturers are trained to teach the material online and in person. So it has this halo cascading effect that you're reaching thousands and thousands of students, but you're also training up lecturers to teach online. And so you've got this really big impact of the program. And I'm very pleased to see that Pebble is going to be, we're going to be hopefully trialing one in Asia and also in West Africa in 2022.
Yeah, it's the stat that I remember. I don't have them in front of me, but the stat that sticks in my mind is it's 11,000 students that program has reached, which is really incredible. And as you say, it's great that we're sort of spreading that.
11,000 students, 700 academics in 23 participating institutions. I've just found it. So that's pretty great. So learnings are, we need to do digital really well. Students want face-to-face and deserve it, but there'll be a blended and hybrid model in the future where we can learn the best of online and some face-to-face. I suspect the model of higher education will also have to change. I think some of the learnings is also that perhaps the 3-year model with large breaks in between might not be sustainable for the long term. And what I wouldn't want to see is a sort of an elite system where that continues, and a mass system where it's degraded into different units. So I would prefer that the elite institutions, it's almost incumbent upon them to find ways of being more inclusive. Other learnings, the decolonization discussion and debate that we've all been having in different circles and in different institutions, and it means different things to different people. I'm not particularly hung up on the name of decolonization. I'm thinking about empowerment and widening participation and honouring different types of knowledge systems, but also understanding that it isn't all about the curriculum. If you want to understand how you can make a change and actually, enrich your campus, your community, and your knowledge, then you also have to think about how your campus looks and feels, and what are your relationships, your local populations and your global populations, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to the ACU doing in 22 and 23 is sort of policy around what good looks like. We've been talking about what good gender looks like. We've talked about what good equality looks like. So what does good equality look like for a university that honours and welcomes all race and sex and gender? So, that's what I'm also looking forward to bringing, is the learnings about that it's not one size fits all. It's not prescriptive. It needs to be inclusive, but it also, the campus and the traditional model probably needs to change.
And do you think, what if I may ask kind of a bit of a probing question, I suppose, what are the implications in an international sense, like thinking about the kind of connections and, you know, international mobility and kind of, you know, students traveling, you know, that because I think that's it is such a core part of what the ACU does, and it's such a core part of, I think, kind of what universities do, is those international connections. Do you see, I mean, what have we learned about that during the pandemic?
I think it's difficult to know what impact it will have yet. I mean, and also, if I have a UK lens on, there's a Brexit implication to mobility as well. I think that surprisingly, mobility was not as impacted as we thought it would be. In that scholarship schemes continued to run, people continued to move country. I mean, and I think that given the right support, a pandemic is a pandemic, but those people who were able to move were also able to be supported in that move. And universities were actually really innovative in finding ways to help support students go through the quarantine procedure, etc. I think that there is always going to be a place for international mobility. The kind of international mobility I want to see is the international mobility based on equitable partnerships, where both sides gain. So some of the work that the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission has pioneered that we support at the ACU is the split site PhD model, for example, because the idea that you have to go overseas or crossing a border to get a decent education is one I'd like to change. I think you go across a border or you go overseas because you want to gain new experiences, maybe new languages, different ways of looking at the same subjects. It will always be an enriching thing, but it should be enriching not because of a desperate need and the only way that one can get something.
Yeah, it's a pull factor rather than a push, right? It's because
yes, exactly. So I think, I mean, it clearly has changed during the pandemic. There is less mobility probably than there was, but actually there's a surprisingly high amount of mobility despite it. And I can't ever see it going away. And I hope it won't, because there's so many reasons to encourage global citizenship, if you like, which is what that mobility does.
Yeah, and I think if you look at sort of the experience of our network and the scholarships that we run and these sorts of things, you know, there's a demand for it as well. You know, you might think, oh, it's a pandemic and therefore, you know, we haven't been able to travel and perhaps the kind of our minds have been focused much more narrowly, perhaps, or locally. But I think we really see, I mean, the summer school that we spoke about is a good example, but there's a real demand. People want to be internationally connected. As you say, you can't see that disappearing. Okay, thank you. What do you think are some of the opportunities for ACU members next year?
There are lots of opportunities for ACU members next year, and in every year. And what we're trying to do, and I think you've done a lot to get us there, Natasha, is make it clearer for universities what the benefits are of ACU membership. So we've done quite well on getting an ambassador figure for each university. And if there's anyone listening to this chat, find out who your university ambassador is. And if you don't know, ask Natasha and if we don't have one, we'll try to find one with you, because they're a vital kind of conduit for us to get information into the university and for the university to let us know what they're doing, because there are lots of grants. We give away nearly sort of £700,000 a year in small grants, and those grants are absolutely transformational. You know, there are gender grants, there's the summer school grants, there's mobility grants. You can travel from one university to another for up to 3 months doing research or teaching, or you can go and attend a conference. If I'm honest, I think one of the areas that the ACU addresses that many organisations don't is supporting early career researchers, because it's exactly those sorts of people who really benefit from mobility grants, because they're just building their network. So we're helping them build them. So please apply for our grants. And there are some fantastic stories behind the grants as well. Other opportunities, our networks. We have a climate and resilience network. We have a peace and reconciliation network. We have a SDG network. We have a human resources in higher education network. These are brilliant opportunities to get plugged into our membership, you know, and they're doing really fantastic work, and in very, very different circumstances. So I remember the launch of the Peace and Reconciliation Network happened in Melbourne University with their PVC Indigenous, Sean Ewan, who is running the programme for us there. our Climate and Resilience Network had a lead from Professor Ian Rowlands from Waterloo University, but it also had, we actually launched it, I think, in Fiji, and we had people from New Zealand and Australia coming to that launch. And, you know, we've all, so whether you're a small island state or a large developed country, climate is affecting all of us severely, and actually working out what role universities have in that, not in the high science, but the resilience side, is what that network looks into. So I'm hoping members will really partake and participate in our networks and get to meet people through that. And of course, as we've learned through the pandemic, actually sometimes meetings are held more successfully virtually than in person. But we're hoping as well to have regional meetings in place in person as soon as we're able, and that will be another opportunity for members. The final opportunity is tomorrow morning. We're having our annual general meeting, and all members are encouraged to come along to that. So whereas we work with vice chancellors or with senior academics in terms of the representation of the university, it's actually the university members who benefit most from ACU membership, like the grants or the activities I've talked about. And actually coming to the AGM, because it's online, it's our opportunity to really showcase the work we've been doing over the last year and the work we want to do next year. And so it's a great opportunity to get to know us a little bit better.
Yeah, looking forward to the AGM tomorrow. It's that kind of, and it's the right time, isn't it? At the end of the year, and there'll be another bit of reflection, I think, but also that looking forward to sort of, as you say, the opportunities and the chances for members to get involved in what we have planned next. Speaking of which, do you have any predictions for 2022? Or maybe predictions is too strong, because that implies that this time next year we'll be asking whether they came true. What would you hope to see?
Okay, what do I hope to see? Right. Okay. I hope to see all the extraordinarily brilliant work our universities do on health policy taking root and being funded, right? That's not something the ACU can directly do, but, you know, Professor Sarah Gilbert and others, Gordon Brown and others have all made the point recently that it's okay to talk about vaccines in arms, but you have to find the right policy to get those vaccines in arms. So I know that universities do extraordinarily interesting and good work on health policy, and I would like to see that come to the fore in terms of advising and helping populations and governments make sure that their citizens are actually safe from this pandemic, which I believe we will live with from many years to come. I don't see it disappearing anywhere. So learning from the pandemic is something I really want to see next year. I want to see us learning about equity and access in healthcare, and also in the digital divide. Of course, I'm hoping for a relaxation of some of the rules. I would hope that there will be a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda that we go to. I'm hoping there will be opportunities to visit some of the countries that we have really strong membership in. And I'm hopeful, I think, that 2022 is a year that, people around the world, our universities particularly, have shown such fortitude and resilience and brilliance, actually, in so many ways. I want to see all of that come to fruition in a 22-23 United Nations high-level policy forum where higher education is actually front and centre of the discussions about education, because there's a recognition that universities are central and important to every one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, and I think COVID has just really, really shown that, since the start, the experts who are, developing the vaccines, who are on TV helping us understand, what either the virus means or the kind of the more broader kind of socioeconomic impacts, the people who are, as you say, informing health policy, these are people in universities, and it's really about building on that. And as you say, I think it's really interesting to reflect on that. If this pandemic is a long-term thing that we have to learn to live with, then the universities move from being crisis response, which they did fantastically at, to that longer-term policy engagement. I think there's such a fantastic role for them to play. Yes, fingers crossed for what you're hoping for sure. What message would you like to share with our members?
Oh, Gosh, okay, well, I think the message has to be the core one of the ACU. We call our strategy the Road to 2030 because we're building a better world through higher education, and we can only do it with our members' involvement and contribution. And so I'm very, very proud to end 2021 and start 22 in the role that I have. And so my message is, let's build a better world through higher education.
What a perfect ending. Thank you, Joanna. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. Keep an eye out on our channels for our end of year message, which is coming out next week. And obviously, you know, throughout 2022, we'll be promoting and pointing you, linking you to lots of the opportunities that have been mentioned during our chat today. But for next year's end of year message, you can expect to see highlights from our member universities across the Commonwealth, also celebrating their achievements in 2021. Thank you, Joanna, for your time today. And thanks again to everyone watching. Take care and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.